Hi, I'm Laura.
Hi, I'm Deanne.
And I'm Philippe.
And welcome to our Lymond book club. We are reading The Ringed Castle by Dorothy Dunnett. And today we are going to talk about part 3, chapters 10 and 11. Dee will lead our discussion, but before we dive in, any initial thoughts?
There's some good stuff that happened, but it's not like the level of excited I was for chapter 9 for sure. But I think it's a nice bridge between that momentous occasion and however we're going to end this book, because I still really don't have any clue.
I agree. Yeah, I agree. I enjoyed these chapters. They were fun to read, especially chapter 11. It was nice. I feel like we're getting some more information in chapter 11. But yeah, I'm not sure I'm gonna have a ton to say because I enjoyed them. They were fun chapters. We'll see. Of course, we're probably gonna get into them and then dive into some detailed discussion about something. But yeah, they were nice.
Yeah, I feel like we already spent a lot of time speculating about Lyman's parentage, which is really kind of the core mystery going on in these. But there's also, I quite enjoy the Lyman is head over heels for Philippa and trying not to let her find out. And she has no idea and is like, oh, you're in love with Guzelle, so blah, blah, blah. It's like, oh, Philippa, no.
I did love how hysterical he got when she said that, because he keeps calling her wise Philippa in this chapter, and it's like, oh, Philippa.
It's really funny. And I think sometimes that's like totally serious. Like she is actually quite wise. Sometimes he's just saying it to be flippant because she's completely misreading the situation. And I do like the way that she both understands and misunderstands him. That there's more than one place where she just completely misreads it, or she makes a misstep. You know, she asks a question that's too intimate or something like that, and so she goes too far, or she doesn't go far enough. You know, I like that it's not, we don't have a character who just, oh, she can read Lyman perfectly. You know, she's still young and all of that.
And we've talked before about these books being tropey, and Dunnett is totally using romance tropes here with, you know, the way Philippa doesn't realize that he loves her so much, and, you know, the way he's hiding it and blah, blah, blah. And I've said before, and I feel like this is just another good representative example that she uses tropes incredibly well, and she's not afraid to just go for it with them. So it's fun.
I'm also incredibly surprised that Lyman didn't just smack Leonard Bailey once or twice. Just, you know, or throw him out the window like I probably would have done or something. That whole situation.
Yeah.
So creepy. Yeah. He makes my skin crawl.
He's terrible. I mean, he's just kind of so pathetic too. So
pathetic and ridiculous. He's like yet another ridiculous person with these ridiculous demands in Lyman's life. Like he keeps surrounding himself with these like incredibly unreasonable people.
Okay, let's get through chapter 10 and then we'll get to chapter 11. I feel like this is like last week. We're just like, let's get through chapter 8 so we can talk about chapter 9. So chapter 10 starts out with kind of preparations to go back to Russia, I guess you would call it, this whole section with Napasia and Danny Hislop. They're kind of they're looking at like how the aftermath of this explosion, or this, I don't know what they're calling it, at the Masks and Revelries place. And there was a point where Danny says something, is it in this section, where Ludo had talked about Lyman's revelry, and Danny was kind of like, what? But yeah, so there's this little entry bit. I don't know, do you have anything to say? Thoughts?
I sort of enjoy, I like how she uses Napasia's point of view to poke at the hypocrisy of the English, because you know, Philippe said before, like, gosh, this guy is a creep. And we, every time we're in his point of view, it is like, you know, incredibly classist and things like that. It's quite unpleasant. But then she does a really good job of like doing that again, right? Where you're like, you're reading it and you're like, yeah, what a jerk. But then she starts transitioning into things like, you know, the English are looking down on us for not having printing presses, and yet they're persecuting people who use them critically in their own country. And how dare they like rip on the czar's, you know, tough punishments when they're going around burning people. And it's actually, she does it really cleverly.
Yeah, I mean, he's definitely pointing out some things that are completely barbaric about England, even though people say that about Russia. But then he also finds things that he's like, oh, if I could bring this back to Russia and we could start doing things this way, that would be incredibly helpful as well. So he's finding his pros and cons.
Yeah, and also just even pointing out little things like she calls herself the Queen of France, but she only has like 2 little fortresses, and just kind of pointing out that little bit of like all these monarchs is like the monarch of XYZ, but not really. So, yeah.
Yep.
I loved it.
There's a line in here that I just enjoy, which is, you know, Danny's always so curious. And when he hears about what happened in the House of Revels, it says, Danny Hislop already staggered by intimations of unheard of levity. So it's just the way he's so like,
yeah. He was like, what? You can just imagine the expression on his face of like when de Harcourt tells him what happened, you know, that he's just like, what did they do?
Yeah. I wouldn't believe it if I hadn't been there myself.
Yeah.
And poor Ludovic, he's got a crush. He's going to have his little heart broken if he's head over heels for Philippa, just like a lot of other people as well. So
bad. I did really like this. She gives this kind of summary of what Lyman is doing to prepare to go back to Russia and all that. And I love this bit at the end where it says, he did what it was Napasia's place to do, and what, unlearned and unable to communicate, the ambassador had never contemplated. And so you get this sense of Lyman actually genuinely doing all this stuff to further the interests of Russia, to try and improve Russia. And it's a lot of like really trying desperately to bring back things that will be genuinely helpful. And, you know, if he can't find a knowledgeable expert in a topic, then he finds a book and gets the best person he can to annotate the book, you know, and it's like he was working really hard, possibly also avoiding thinking about certain things, but working really hard.
Well, and it is interesting because it's like, I don't know if I highlighted the specific line, but it was something like, you know, this time it wasn't just about war, it was also about all these other things. And I think there were sort of implications of that earlier on too, where it was basically running the military is going to put me in the position to then be able to change the country for the better. And the way that like who Lymond is as a person, this extremely thoughtful, literate person. Mm-hmm. Why is he a mercenary? It's a stepping stone to trying to genuinely, you know, make people's lives better. It's just that he has to have his own independent power base in order to be able to do that. So yeah, I like this illustration of it. I also really like there's like this bit about on a task such as this, Lyman was always easy to work with.
Yeah.
And it's just this whole description of him that's so different from how he was earlier in the book, where he's, you get the much more, there he was quiet, carrying other minds with him. His own thinking heavily concentrated and naturally lucid in exposition. He was not, as Philippa had once called him, magisterial. Just this idea of this other side of him that is, again, just like a better, more appealing version than whipping mercenary leader guy.
Yeah, I like the, this is, on the other hand, he did not invite to work with him any but those who were capable of it. And he reminds me, I doubt either of you know this character, but there's a science fiction series by a woman named Lois McMaster-Bujold, and she wrote a series about a character who is very severely physically handicapped, but incredibly charismatic and dynamic, and his name is Miles Barkosigan. I recommend the series if anyone wants to read it. But Miles is this kind of character. Like, he gathers people around him, and whatever their skills are, Miles like ups their skill level. Like, whatever they think they can do, he spurs them on to greater whatever. And I feel like Lyman's kind of like that. Like, he gathers around him people who are capable, and then helps them reach their potential, which
I have not read it, but it comes up a lot as like, if you like Lymond, try these other things.
oh, you should definitely read it. I love that series. It's fantastic. And not as heartbreaking. Well, actually, there's definitely some heartbreaking stuff now that I think about it, but it's good. It's really good.
I was thinking the other day, you were so upset about Chancellor's death, but like, you powered through the Untamed, and worse stuff happens in the Untamed.
I powered through, but I powered through the Untamed. The more and more I think about it, the more I think there is truth to the fact that it's this pace that we're going at that is making this so hard for me. Because the Untamed, I like powered through the bad stuff. I mean, when there were scenes, it's like, okay, we got to get to something good, you know. And with this, we've just been doing it so slowly, and so tragedy happens, and I just sit with it for a week, you know. And
yeah, I think it was seasonal too, because we were reading Pawn in like the winter, and
yeah, it was just kind of all festering, you know. So anyway.
There was another good Danny line to celebrate where they've been working for so long, and they've skipped some meals and drinks, and Danny says, I haven't been working at all well. Hislops need lubrication.
Yes. Yes.
Question. So Lyman has also set himself to force through the annulment of his marriage. Thoughts?
Yeah, he is. I'm not sure in denial is the right way to put it, because he's not in denial. I think he's acknowledging what he feels. He's just failing to see that it's possible, you know, and has just decided that somehow he has to save Philippa from himself, or he has to, you know, this can never be. So he's full steam ahead on let's annul the marriage and go to Russia forever, which is absolutely not going to happen.
Which is also very tropey, though. I can't be with
you. I can't be with you. I'm not good enough for you. I can't be with you.
It's another instance of Lyman being self-sacrificial. He's like, I'm giving up possible happiness because I don't want to drag her down into this mire that I've built around my life. And it's those walls going back up. Yeah. Because he's going back to the cold, frigid country.
It is very understandable, though, when you look at like every single person he gets close to does tend to die horribly right afterward.
Absolutely. I mean, if he never got close to another woman again after
Christian.
No.
Una?
Thank you. I was like, why am I blinking on her name? After Una, I mean the shock and trauma of her death, just like, that would break someone forever. So yeah. But he's a fictional character, and we will hopefully keep moving forward. I thought it was interesting too that Ludo de Harcourt, this is at 542. Ludo de Harcourt returned dazzled from Blackfriars, had given him hope that against all expectation, the Voivode, was about to become human. So then we're back to that like mechanistic human thing of his. That proved a fallacy, as de Harcourt also discovered. The damage at Blackfriars had generously, even royally, made good. But after it, the Voivode had withdrawn behind a barrier as distinct as it was deliberate. There was no more play acting. So just this, the curtain has been drawn, you know, has been dropped in front of his like joy and laughter and all of that.
Well, and he knows he's super vulnerable to it still because he's trying to stay far away from Philippa and he's being like really rude to her. Just trying to like keep his distance.
Yep.
So I think like we can say the curtains have closed or the walls have gone up, but it's also like it's a bit fragile because then in the next chapter, you know, he's trying to put a wall up and it just keeps coming down. He brings up another boring topic and suddenly it becomes interesting because it's the two of them talking about it.
And also Lyman started drinking again and Adam noticed. Mm-hmm. So I thought that was a nice touch. That's like Adam's the one who sees that he's not only is he drinking, but that Adam is like, this is out of character for who he is now.
Adam is a great character to just have in the mix to notice these things in subtle ways that no one else is going to notice. We also have, I guess this is more of a plot question. Why does Lyman not want Adam or Ludo to be told about this Courtney's papers thing that he's working with Danny on?
I think it's plausible deniability that if he does end up getting caught in it, they can actually say, we had no idea we weren't a part of this. Because I think they don't lie as well as Danny Hislop does.
Oh, that's true. I hadn't thought of that. I was thinking it was different. I am still suspicious that I know that there's sort of this, maybe Ludo didn't actually confess thing, but I think he did. I think he was actually the person that we're supposed to be suspicious of, at least for up until a certain point. So I think maybe Lyman is like, he's not completely trustworthy. And then Adam, I think it's just keeping him out of bad stuff. I don't think it has to be the same motivation for both of them. I think Ludo's less trustworthy and Adam needs to not be thrown into a fire. Like, you know, and Danny can take care of himself. Yeah, I think you're right about Danny can talk his way out of stuff. So, yeah. Any other thoughts on that? Okay, so this next section, we're back to Philippa, and we have this it's kind of a big section about politics and like what's going on with King Philip and what's going on with there's this a whole bunch of stuff is happening on like late April and May, and like on the day of on May 19th, April 19th, this happened, and May 3rd, this happened, and there's this guy who was apparently trying to invade England or something from France, but not actually from France. He was just, I wasn't quite sure what was going on there. And then we have kind of Napasia coming in. It's all politics. This is all politics, but in the midst of that, we do have Philippa and Lyman have some little exchanges, or lack of exchanges as the case may be.
Yeah.
And Margaret Lennox is very observant of all of them while it's happening. So
that is true.
For what she did to Christian, every time I see her noticing Philippa, I get like high.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And it's like, it makes sense for Lyman to pretend not to be into Philippa, because as soon as Margaret Lennox thinks there's anything between them, she's just gonna extra want to hurt Philippa, just like she did Christian.
Absolutely. At the beginning of this, when we're in Philippa's point of view, we get a sense of her perspective, like about Lyman after the Blackfriars thing, where she says he was making unforeseen strides, meaning Lyman's like emotional state, I think. But then she says she only hoped that Kaya Khatun would not undo the good work when she got him. And so like Philippa is clearly under this assumption that not only is Lyman going back to Russia, but that he's going back to this woman, like that he's not, there's no thought in her mind that he is interested in her, or that he's going to stay for her or anything like that.
But also I love how she's thinking of him as like an improvement project.
Yeah. No. He gave her much satisfaction, the improvement that
it's just like, I think, you know, you can debate how much she actually feels for him, but there's definitely something, you know, subconscious where she cares about him and is trying to help.
Yeah.
Romantic or not, TBD.
Yeah, I mean, I think she definitely cares for him. I think she cares strongly for him. Like, we have seen her, like, you know, she rides through the rain all day, and I mean, she obviously cares for him. I'm not sure that her care for him at this point, it doesn't feel like romantic or sexual attraction, or it doesn't feel like her brain has gone there yet. And I don't know if it's because subconsciously she's attracted to him, but hasn't, like, that hasn't trickled up to the top of her mind yet, or if that's, he's just never been an option for her. And so, you know, maybe that's it. And we do get a sense that she thinks he's a lot older than he is. Just like he thought she was so much younger than she is, she thinks he's a lot older than he is.
And I like the little like the foreshadowing. She made up her mind to find out how old Mr. Crawford was, and then in the next chapter she finds out.
Yep, I put a little smiley face next to that. I was like, so did we, the whole series.
It also does like to put her readers in the position of her characters so that we understand where they're coming from, because we've been there.
Yes, so true. So then we get this whole bit about the Queen and the Cardinal and the Pope and Philip and blah, blah, blah. I was like, okay, whatever.
The bits that I highlighted were all the little personal things that popped in, like in between, basically. I do think, like, I don't want to be too critical, but I do think in this book the melding of the politics with the character stuff is not done as well. So much of the politics is an info dump and we don't care, and then we get to the character stuff and we're like, oh, super care. Whereas I genuinely think in the earlier books it was just better integrated, and that we cared about all of it because it all just fit together better.
Yeah.
Reasonable people may disagree, but yeah.
I mean, the stuff with Thomas Stafford, who Dee, you were talking about earlier, the guy that sort of tries to invade Scotland, it doesn't seem important, but I think it's going to be very important because it's basically going to set England at war with France, which has sort of been boiling up for the entirety of this book, and it's about to actually happen.
Yeah, we get a sense at the end of chapter 11 that this is a disaster that is...
No, for sure. I feel like the difference is, like, in Game of Kings, like, Stafford would have been a minor character in some way that we would have known, and like Courtenay would have been a character in some way that we would have known. Like, we would have been exposed to these people more throughout the narrative and had some personal investment in them, and it wouldn't have just been like references to letters and things that are very removed from like the story and the characters that our hearts connect to.
Or even in Pawn and Frankincense, you know, there was so much politics about Suleiman and his son and all of that stuff. And we never met those characters, but we cared about them. And we cared about that politics because it had such a direct, like, we could see that direct link on the characters we cared about as the politics is being talked about.
Yeah, and we had like, we had more connection to them, I feel like, because we had Lyman did have the audience with Suleiman, and Philippa had the relationship with Roxolana, and like I liked the scene where she plays the body song for Roxolana that makes her laugh. Like, there's like more of a human feeling that we had for them. We have it in here with Mary, but we don't have it with these plots that are actually moving like big things. The Courtenay one and the Stafford one. Anyway,
there's this little bit. I did like this little bit about the Pope's letter to Mary, which is like the tone of it was great. He says, we would willingly separate the Queen's cause from her. We know not whether to call him husband, cousin, or nephew, which I was like, ouch. And then, and to have her as a daughter. so the Pope's talking about like Queen Mary as a daughter, and then at the end of that paragraph it says, blah blah blah, or we will spare neither relatives nor friends, but include in our maledictions and anathemas all who shall desert the cause of God. So it's like, yeah, you're my daughter, but if you don't do what I want, like, you're not going to be spared. And so I thought that was kind of a nice sense of doom coming, but I still didn't really care all that much about the details.
I assume that those are all real quotes from real letters, but I don't know for sure, but that one is great.
Yeah, it was a great quote. I'm like, ouch, the Pope has gotten a little spicy.
I mean, popes were political and military like power forces back then.
That's true.
So going back to the personal stuff that's woven within, I do love, there's a description of Philippa where she's wearing this very fancy, expensive dress, and it says, Philippa added to it all the accessories it demanded, which were a straight back, a severe hairline, and a scowl.
Yes, I like that too.
And a hat that looks like a sock.
Oh.
Yeah. I also appreciated the just a reminder of how pragmatic Philippa is, where she's talking about Lyman, or Philippa is in, so de Harcourt sent her a note, Philippa, accustomed by now to the minimal courtesies, recalled that with Mr. Crawford, the proffering of even the minimal courtesies was dependent on the current state of his nerves. She took, since there was no other course, a philosophic view of the matter. And so it's just like, she's just pragmatic, you know, like, yep, he's kind of rude. And oh well.
Yep. I quite like the fact that she realizes someone's looking at her, but she doesn't know who it is. And when she looks at Lyman, he's looking down, and you know that like he totally was watching her. And then when she looked up, he looked down. It's great.
I've never played that game at all.
Nobody does that. But then you get that ominous, you know, she stared at him for a while with her eyebrows raised, then realized that Lady Lennox was looking at her and let her eyes wander. You know, so Margaret Lennox is paying attention to all of this. So
not good.
I mean, her threat still stands.
Yeah.
Yep. Then we also have Lyman drinking more again after this, drinking to not think about Philippa, I guess.
Doesn't seem to be overdoing it. He seems to be able to contain it and stop at a certain point. But I mean, we've seen his addictive personality and the fact that he was addicted to things he didn't even realize he was taking before. So addiction is something that can creep back up on you.
Yeah, it's interesting because I think it's not being depicted like in any way that he's binge drinking or whatever, but it's more just like he has had such intense self-control over the drinking that the fact that he's doing it at all tells us how his emotions are out of his control, and he's trying to like rein them in, you know? So it's like, even if it's not a problem, it's the fact that he's doing it.
Cheers, Lyman.
Did you just have that waiting there off screen?
I've been sipping on wine throughout this, so just a little bit.
Great.
Post dinner drink.
Water.
Yeah, I have my water too, so keeping hydrated.
I miss wine. Okay, so are we still in this section? There's a great bit. I might be jumping ahead. There's this great bit where there's another mask, and the pilgrims' robes were decorated with a most unusual linear design in yellow, ochre, sap green, and dragon red. And if you go backwards to the scene in the House of Revels on 531, when the stands get knocked down, there is nothing, silence, but the trickling of saffron, vermilion, yellow ochre, sap green, and red lead as they spread across the floor of the revel.
Just a spilled paint. I love it.
Yeah. It's such a subtle little thing, but I remember when I read that at some point, I was like, that sounds really familiar.
That's so great. There is this nice bit where like Philippa's kind of chasing after him on 548, 549, and then he's gone by the time she gets to the boat or whatever, and so then she gives to Harcourt a message, and so to Harcourt becomes like her errand boy kind of to Lyman, and Lyman seems to be kind of laughing about it, and he's like, sorry, he's not going to send anything back to her. And basically Philippa knew that, like you can see, because de Harcourt was like, well, okay, in that case this, and then okay, in that case this. And so finally he says, she said if you wouldn't write, I was to give you a message. She says, what about Gardington? So
I also like Ludo getting a little snarky in that scene as Lyman is rude to him, and he's like, I'm only her errand boy, and ends up storming off.
I don't know. I feel like I misjudged Ludo. I still think he was trying to kill Lyman, but like, I can't help but kind of like him now a little bit. And Danny and Adam, like, I don't know. They're definitely the three of the St. Mary's men that we've gotten to know the most in this book. So
I agree. I kind of like them all three. I still am suspicious that Ludo was our guy before. I think so. I would like to see that confirmed or disproven, whichever.
I would be very surprised if it's not.
Me too.
I mean, if it's not Ludo, that's one thing, but I would be very surprised if we don't find out what was going on at some point in the next, what is there, 3 more chapters, I think?
I hope we find out what was going on. But I completely agree. I like all three of them, and I really hope all three of them. I had this like little bit, I mean, it wasn't a panic attack or anything, but I had this little bit of like, oh no, at one point where I was like, maybe this is all a misdirect and Adam's been the bad one the whole time. I'm like, no, it can't be.
I won't like that at all if that's true.
Oh, yeah.
It can't be right.
I immediately dismissed that idea because I just didn't like it. So
whip him in the face and scar him for life.
I don't like it.
But he's also, he did it to save his life, and it's not the first time he saved his life. He got him off of opium. He saved him from Graham Reed Mallett's clutches. I don't know. I don't think Adam is our.
To work for the Muscovy company. He doesn't have to be around Lyman, and like he doesn't have to be reminded of that, but I don't want him to be a bad guy.
And he was so incredibly happy that Lyman was getting out of Russia.
Yeah.
He was like, thank God.
Yeah.
Good point.
He misses his old friend Lyman, who hasn't called him by his first name in quite some time now.
So then we have a little bit more about blah, 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 what's happening with various people landing places and things happening on dates of April and May and da-da-da. Then we're going, and then we have Philippa and Lyman. So, yeah. So Philippa is following him. I don't know how. That's kind of the summary of what's going on next.
So it's like their journey to Gardington. I like how it says Francis Crawford of Lymond canceled his engagements and went off to Gardington. So like we're told right away, this is not the Voivoda. This is, Francis Crawford.
Yep. And I love this, like, you're coming to protect me. You need a witness, said Philippa. Unwanted, unasked, unwelcome as ever. Here I am. Again, said Lyman. If she had not been expecting it, it might have hurt, although he had not spoken sharply. Yes, again, said Philippa. Has it ever occurred to you that if you sometimes invited me somewhere, I shouldn't always have to keep standing in doorways being glared at?
It is a great reminder of the fact that she literally like ran away from home as a teenager and followed him halfway around the world.
I know. Unasked, unwanted, uninvited. And yeah, I just love that. She's just like, well, if you would just invite me places, then I wouldn't have to sneak in and you glare at me from the doorway.
Completely holds her own with him. It's so refreshing.
It's so good.
So of course he doesn't want her to come with him, and he tries every argument to convince her otherwise. And then what actually ends up working is that she cries. And I wanted to talk about that scene because I feel like it's really interesting character stuff going on there, and a really interesting comparison between Lyman and Austen. And it kind of shows us how young Philippa still is. Like, she's learned this trick to basically manipulate Austen, and she uses it on Lyman, and it works. But she's upset that it worked, and she swears she'll never do it again.
I actually don't think it worked. I think it made him mad at her. Like, I think my reading of this was that she did this very manipulative thing that she had learned to do for this soppy young boy, Austen. And Lyman immediately saw what she was doing, trying to manipulate him by crying, and he just took off on his horse. And he was mad that I think his response was that she used this cheap trick on him instead of actually talking about it.
To be clear, I'm not saying it worked the same way. And he even says that it works on me too, but perhaps not quite in the same way. It works in the sense that she gets what she wants. She goes with him to Gardington. It works differently than she expected. It sends him off riding so far that then when she chases after him, he kind of has to let her come along, but it has the end result that she wanted.
Yeah, I guess it's just that I think that what worked was her persistence, not the crying. Like, the crying, what worked was that she chased after him, and she chased after him until she was in danger of getting sick and all this. And so at that point, his responsibility for her took over, and that's what won. But the crying totally failed. It was like, that didn't work at all. And it was just her persistence, as I think is typical of her. Like, that's what she wins with him, is that she's persistent and she doesn't give up. And that's what won in Con and Frankincense. She just never went home.
Yeah, for sure. I just think it's interesting. I don't know if he's angry. I know he knows she's manipulating him. I'm not sure it's clear that he's angry.
Maybe not.
There's definitely some disappointment that she stooped so low in this estimation.
Like, they're kind of equals in a lot of ways, or she can hold her own with him, and then she does this cheap trick that's not, like, it's just worthless and see-through. And I think it's like this thing that worked on Austen Gray is not going to work on Lyman, and he knows that.
I'm not sure how much of that is us and how much is him, though. I think that's what we're all thinking and, kind of are being led to think, but I don't know if that's what he's thinking, because he's in love with her.
Yeah, but I think he's not. I think he's in love with her because of how dynamic she is and how much of a, like, force that he can interact with, how much of an equal that she is for him, and how he sees that. And this is beneath her, and he sees it. And she knows it, like, almost immediately.
Oh, no, of course. It's interesting that the response he gives is, I don't deserve that, I think. Because normally he thinks he deserves all kinds of suffering, but he doesn't deserve this.
Yeah. It was like something that you would do with a stupid, callow boy instead of, and he's not stupid.
And then what does it tell us about Austen?
Stupid. Yeah, she's super embarrassed, and she should be.
Well, then she concludes, for he did not want her. Of that there was loweringly no possible doubt.
Yeah.
Philippa.
So then the rest of their day is so different from her experience of him hitherto. So they have this whole interaction throughout this that is this whole new way of them interacting.
So the next couple of pages, or to the end of the chapter, all the way to the end of the
Pretty
chapter?
much, yeah.
Yeah, to the end of the chapter is just mostly Lyman controlling the conversation, but yet also they're able to have these moments of more emotional interaction and more intimate discussion. There's like bits throughout the day. So like most of the day is at the bottom of 554, where it says, it was only gradually that she came to realize how steadily he was controlling the conversation. And so that's what he's doing most of the day, but it doesn't always, there's bits that come through. So.
Well, no, I mean, I love how Dunnett describes it, because Philippa concluded, it was notable simply because there seemed, Philippa concluded, to be so few dull topics in the world. And even when he thought he had found one, it would suddenly burst into life, full of new aspects and intriguing possibilities as they discussed it. And then he would switch subjects again. And I've totally had that experience, the rare times where I fell in love with someone where like everything that you say to each other is sparkling and you just have this amazing connection. And it is like she just described it exactly, where no matter what you're talking about, because it's the two of you talking about it, and when you have that connection with someone and your wits just connect, everything sparkles, and you're at a level above where you can normally converse, and you just elevate each other and have a great conversation. And I just love how much he's trying not to let it happen, and it can't, like he can't help it.
Yeah.
They just have this amazing connection.
And also I love that they're kind of trying to like sort of one up each other a little bit, like in ways, and there's a point where like he says this thing about how like I have read some books since I left my library at Mid-Culture Capital, and then she later says, I have read some works other than the primary textbooks in the inadequate library at Mid-Culture. Did you read my first library? So it's just this like, but I've done this. It's like, well, but I've done. I like it.
It's got a great like gentle edge to it.
Yeah. Like even if he's trying not to like engage with her on that level that they had at Blackfriars, like they can't help it really.
Well, and it's quite interesting because like I think because he only let that happen because he saw her as this child, and he wasn't realizing it was a possibility, and so it happened. And then once it has happened, he's like, oh no, now I can't let this happen anymore. But it's too late.
Yeah. And I also like the way that she's talking about exploring, and she says like, I'd like to follow Cabot and Burroughs and Jenkinson. I should want to explore. And then he calls her on the fact that she avoids saying Chancellor's name. And he's like, you avoided Chancellor. And she says, and then she calls him on what they're doing. She's like, I thought it was in the rules, no emotive topics in case we exhaust ourselves before reaching Master Bailey. And so she's like, yeah, but you didn't want to talk about emotional things. So it's just, they see each other to some extent.
Yeah, and they're not afraid to say it. I do also like, I mean, it's sort of a flat out statement of something that's been in the text for like the whole time, but these explorations are important, perhaps the most attractive prospect the world holds today for anyone of imagination and stamina. Which, makes sense. Like, who wouldn't want to go be an explorer and adventurer back then?
Yeah. Is book 6 going to end with like Lyman and Philippa on a boat headed to parts unknown? I could see that happening.
I could too. Sail off in the sunset.
Sail off in the sunset. Go headed towards a part of the map that says there be dragons. Find out what's there.
Well, it's interesting because this discussion about Chancellor leads into some other weighty subjects that are definitely emotive, that it's nice to finally see them talking about, considering they both witnessed. So Kozum is brought up. And then the parentage of Lyman is brought up, which is the reason they're going to visit George Bailey. I keep calling him George Bailey. Leonard Bailey. George Bailey is Miracle on 42nd Street.
No, George Bailey is It's a Wonderful Life.
Oh, whatever. They're all the same. And it's Miracle on 34th Street, and I said 42nd Street. So I'm really confused.
Like every angel gets his wings when a bell rings or something.
I will call him George Bailey at least 5 more times. So Leonard Bailey.
Just name half the characters in this series. So
it's No, so let's talk about this reveal about Kuzum, because this is obviously the people who really want to debate which child is which, pick through every line of these. So Margaret Lennox has told Philippa that Kuzum is not Lyman's, and Lyman says he lied to her.
Philippa looks at him and says, I don't deserve that, which I read as her saying, don't lie to me. Like, that she knows that Lyman told Margaret Lennox the truth, and that him saying it's a lie to her is a lie. And she's like,
well, and the fact that it says and it's a counter to what happened earlier. She tried to manipulate him and he said he didn't deserve it, and then he tries to manipulate her for her own good. I mean, and she says she doesn't deserve that. Yeah, don't lie to me.
Yeah. So I took this as further confirmation that the child who lives is Gabriel Jolita's.
Yeah. Because even when she says, I don't deserve that, Lyman's response is, Kuzumi is who he is. As everyone keeps insisting, parentage doesn't matter. Love him for what he is. Let your mother continue to love him. The death of the other child is my affair. So that feels like to me, him saying, yes, that is the way that I think it happened, but that's my burden to bear, not yours.
Right. And just no matter the parentage of the boy, love him anyway. Whereas if he was actually Lyman's son, he wouldn't have to say that, because he would love him because of his parentage, like, in addition to other things. So,
and if it's not an outright confession that that's what he truly believes, he's at least strongly hinting that he isn't even sure which child is which at this point, and he's just going to assume one way. So
I don't read it that way. I think he knows.
I think he does too, but like, you can see it that way, that he's giving her that option of believe what you will. So
like, maybe he's throwing her a bone of like, maybe.
Well, yeah, in the sense of saying it doesn't matter, but yeah, I think it's pretty clear that he thinks Kuzum is not his.
Yeah.
And I think it gives us insight into his decision process at the time, where he says the death of the other child is my affair, which kind of goes with what we talked about then, which is that given the implications of the choice, Philippa would have suffered so greatly if Kuzum had been the one to die, but the only person who would suffer for Kairedin's death was Lymond himself, and so the fact that he chose that because he wanted the burden on him and not on Philippa.
Let's not talk about it anymore. I'm still traumatized by all of that.
It's very traumatic.
Well, I mean, Philippa does kind of make a misstep here by, and you run your affairs so efficiently, she said with sudden acidity, and then ashamed, she said, will you have a son by Guzel? Which was not really the best thing to say at the time.
No.
It sets off quite a period of time where they're traveling and not speaking to each other. So, but again, she's misreading the situation because she thinks that Lymond is in love with Guzel.
Well, I think also just talking with children is such a downer that they're not going to have the banter the same way.
Yeah.
But then
they have their own child. Oh, I hope that happens.
Wait, what?
I said until they have their own child.
Oh.
Maybe that'll be after book 6. I don't know.
Huh. That would be interesting. I don't have hopes that that'll happen. It would be cool.
I mean, the last book would have to last over a year if they were going to have their own child. So
it is big. It's a thicker book.
It is.
We've gone through several years in this book, apparently.
Many. It's true.
I also love that, like, she sneezes so they're traveling along and he's asked her, are you tired? And she's like, no. Yeah, like her first instinct is no, I'm fine. And then she's like, wait, yes, I'm tired. And then she sneezes and he's like, oh God. It's kind of cute.
It's very cute. He's so upset and he's so apologetic, and then he pulls a very like Wei Wuxian kind of self-blaming thing of like, I apologize, like I forced you to ride 40 miles, blah, 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 in the bad weather. It was unchristian to be bad-tempered as well. And she's like, you forced me.
Yeah, and I love her. I love her response. It's like, well, I don't mind helping you feel guilty if you must. You know, it's just like, that is not what happened. But
he does, like, he's so self-blaming, and it's so blatantly ridiculous here after she followed him.
yeah, she very much is responsible for her own state of exhaustion at this point.
She's very perceptive and notices the headaches. Have we seen her? Does she know about the headaches previously, or is she just putting this together now?
Weren't they brought up before?
I feel like there's something in the previous chapter where she might have mentioned that she was noticing it.
I think she saw something earlier.
But it is really notable because no one else seems to have picked up on it. Even Adam, as far as we know, we haven't heard anything, and Danny seems oblivious. And we have one of those examples of how his hands tell us what's going on with him. His hands clasp white together between his boots and his head bent. That's how she knows he has the headache.
Oh, as someone who gets really, really bad headaches, I'm like, oh, Lyman, I feel for you. I'm so sorry. Yeah.
Well, and I mean, I don't know if it's too early to talk about it, but like, what do you think is going on with headaches? Because you kind of were saying it was triggered by Richard hitting him.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it seems like if they were triggered, because that's when we started seeing them, right? Because if they were an opium withdrawal thing, wouldn't we have seen them in Russia? But it seems like the damage that Richard did to him, it seems like he's got brain damage of some sort. Is what I don't know, maybe?
I think it's a possibility. I think also they're triggered by strong emotions, and he was keeping his emotions frozen in Russia, and it was really like the first time he had the big emotions was when he started coming back here. And so it could be a combination of things. It could be the opium, it could be the hit from Richard, it could be other blows that had earlier, like all coming together so that when the emotions are strong, this happens.
Mm.
Yeah. We get this interesting after the headache moment, and Lyman's trying to sort of be like, I'm okay, you know, I can handle Bailey and Miss Somerville. And then she asked him like why he changed his mind about coming to see Bailey, which was another misstep that she makes. You know, another question that was perhaps too soon or too blunt. And so then his answer, it says, for without emotion, his answer was chilling. Because I think of something you said, one should be able to face anything. I have learned to play chess again. I have learned to listen to music and to play it. I have learned to buy self-indulgence and enjoy it. I have learned to take a line of logic and follow it through, whatever the consequences. I should be able to withstand the revelation that I'm a bastard and my mother a whore. And it seems like he says this speech to the one person who can understand this speech. You know, like, can anyone else know what he means by all of this? Like, I learned to play chess again, and I learned to follow logic to its end, and all of that. Yeah, it just made me sad. So it's a cold speech. He says it with a cold tone of voice, but he also says it to someone who understands what he means.
I think the only other person who could understand it is Guzel. It's an echo of what she said to him, and it shows her influence on him.
Yeah.
But Philippa can understand it as a tragic and horrible thing, whereas Guzel thinks it's a good thing.
Yeah, right. Like Philippa understands it with empathy, and Guzel does not. Yeah, that's true. Oh.
I also I do super love the the reference to Michal. You told Michal once in Thessalonica that you have never loved anyone. That was a lie. You feel for Sibylla quite as much as she has always felt for you. And I think that's interesting in obviously multiple ways. One is the younger eyes denying it. If you want to say it's Lyman denying that he's going to fall in love. There's an example when he said that to Michal that he never would. But then also Philippa thinking the love he feels is for Sibylla, which of course it is, but it's for her. That's the big change he's experiencing.
Yeah. And again, we just get these moments of humor, which I love, where Philippa's like, I shouldn't want to be Gavin's son either. I don't think, said Lyman, you could be. Kind of politely amused. And just like this little like plays on words and humor, even in the midst of this like deep stuff they're talking about, you still get these fun little bits. I don't know. Heredity is an odd thing.
Yeah, who's she going to mention here? Look at, and then broke off. Was it Richard?
I thought it was Kazum and Kareddin that she was talking about, like heredity of them being mistaken for each other, like real son being mistaken for his son, and like all of that. And she breaks off and like don't. But I could be wrong. Totally.
I mean, that makes sense.
I took it that way too, as a reference to the children, because the way she cuts herself off and says don't. Yeah. But then she does kind of bring up, I think, why the thing with Sibylla is so traumatic, which is, you know, she says on the top of 559, even if you accept bastardy, you are left to wonder why Sibylla didn't confess to you, since you have always been so very close. It's just the fact that it's not even the fact that she may not have been faithful, but the fact that whatever it was so terrible that she didn't tell him and that she didn't trust him and she lied to him.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me. Like, at what point was she supposed to have told him? You know, like, obviously she wasn't going to tell him when he was a kid. Like, little kids, you're not going to tell them terrible secrets, whatever they are, you know. So at some point when he's an adult, she's going to tell him. But at what point was she supposed to tell him as an adult when, like, because so he goes, when he's a kid, he goes off, he gets enslaved and all of this, and then he comes back and he's a bandit, and, you know, and at some point the secret becomes like, she's kept the secret so long, like, how does she tell her son, like, here's this thing I've kept from you all these years, please don't be mad at me, you know, like, so at what point does she say that? So I do have some sympathy about just how difficult that conversation would have been and how easy it would have been to avoid having it for far too long. So.
No, for sure. And I think we as like third parties can see that.
Oh, Lyman doesn't see it.
But yeah, Lyman's just never gonna see it that way. You know, he's just gonna be like, why did she lie to me?
Yeah, and then we get this delightful moment about she's like, Philippa is reading him so right and so wrong at the same time. It's so good. That like, absence has hardened you. There are things you can face now which you couldn't face in Istanbul, and because I think at last the bond with Sibylla is being shared with another, before all your mind and all your emotions were contained in your feeling for her, now it is different. Now you have Gazelle's love also. It's just like, oh, I wrote off to the side, oh, Philippa. And then he kind of has this reaction of slightly hysterical laughter.
She made him laugh yet again.
He must have been so terrified that she was about to call him out and be like, and now you're in love with me. This is also like in the Untamed, when Lan Wangji gets drunk and he thinks he told Wei Wuxian that he likes him, and Wei Wuxian's teasing him, you said you like rabbits.
Rabbits. Oh, rabbits. Everybody needs to watch The Untamed. So.
if you like the tropes that make up Lymond, you will like the Untamed because it's made of the same tropes.
Hi, sweetie.
I drink my tea.
She's like, I want to be on camera.
She's been on camera quite a bit.
Okay. So,
well, and his reaction here is really interesting. It's so strong.
Yeah.
This is like one of the first times we see him like really not be able to control himself in terms of how he responds. He says, I do not think I can manage both Master Bailey and Mr. Somerville. And he has to sit there and he says, I just need 5 minutes. And he takes 10. And it's all so un-Lymond-like that he's having such an intense like emotional and physical reaction to this moment.
Just needs to compose himself a bit after that.
Yeah, I think it's like the headache is so bad, but it's also just like the overwhelming amount of like emotional response. Like he really did think that she was about to call out him being in love with her. Mm-hmm. And he just could not deal with that.
Yeah. And I just, the hysterical laughter it's such a response of like stress. It's such a stress response to have to just to break into hysterical laughter. And I think that's like, it's a great scene. Like it's such a believable response to this exchange. Yeah, I really liked it.
Well, and I super love how Dunnett uses like making him this incredibly self-controlled character who's so strong and closed off and whatever, because then when she does have him break, it has such an impact.
Yeah. What do you do? Yeah, so they're gonna go see Master Bailey, but they're gonna stay overnight in this hotel. And then we get this sort of ominous messenger situation where this poor messenger guy, you kind of feel bad for him, who like rode 70 miles or something to tell Danny that Peter, what's his name, has landed, and then Danny sends him after Lymond, but he accidentally falls asleep by the side of the road because he was riding his horse for so long, and you're like, oh, I'm sorry. It's a little bit, you got to blame Danny a little bit for not sending somebody else, for like not noticing this guy was completely exhausted.
Danny's not the most empathetic, and that messes him up sometimes.
Yeah, he definitely was not paying attention. But we have this Thomas Stafford situation, and Philip seems to be pretty happy. The French have apparently broken the truce, and the English are ready for war. We didn't mention something that I thought was interesting earlier. There was a bit in the whole political one of the earlier political sections that we glossed over, where Philip had been, Philip is too poor to wage this war. And so he's wanting the English to pay for it. And he's like, I'll loan me all your money and I'll pay you back, da, da, da. And then there's this line about how the Englishmen were not counting their gold. So there's just like, there seems to be a great reluctance to invest in this war that Philip wants. So we shall see.
Yeah, and the idea of this whole thing was basically allowed to happen so that it will prompt the war.
Yeah. So what will happen? And then we get chapter 11 and the visit to Leonard Bailey.
Leonard Bailey, agreed.
Not George. Yeah. So we start this visit with the the delightful exchange between Lyman and Philippe and the hired neighbor guys, I guess. Like these guys, I just get this sense of like a band of like slightly confused ruffians who are basically just the neighborhood young men, and they know they're supposed to keep Lymond out, but they're not that determined to do it. So
Well, and just the way his manipulation tactics are so polished and effective at this point. It's the same kind of stuff he used to lead the bandits in the first book, but it's in art form, you know, and he almost pushes it to past the point of believability, but he knows exactly how to tread the line. The roofs in Russia are paved with gold, and if you're, you know, if you get on my good side, maybe I'll take you there, and you can join my mercenary army.
Here's some gold, go get the ale, you know?
Yeah,
like
yeah, the ale's here, everyone. I promise not to kill this guy. Go have some ale.
he just knows these guys, you know, he knows what they want. He knows how to like get him to do what he wants. And it was just kind of fun to just read him play them and all of that.
And the way he uses humor too, he's so funny that like diffuses the tension with them right away. He's quite witty.
Yeah. Also, I just like the way Dunnett does things like, but you must have a boy somewhere who could go for the ale. There was a boy. It's just like these nice little, the humor and the rhythm of Dunnett's writing is funny. It's just nice.
And it's I just miss it so much in the early part of the book because we don't get it for so long because she's so good at it, you know.
Yeah. This is honestly one of the sections like I didn't like write down very much. I just enjoyed reading it. So I don't know if you guys marked down stuff, but
yeah, well, I'll you know, just jump in whenever you have stuff. 565, I have a thing I highlighted. They're at the manor of Gardington, and he says, "Your manor is very fine. They nearly gave it to me." And I remember back when we read Game of Kings, there's this part about how Lyman was a traitor and he was given the manor of Gardington as a thank you from Henry VIII for betraying the Scottish. And I remember UD being like, Lyman has an English manor? What? And I wanted to be like, no, he didn't get it. Leonard Bailey got it. But
you don't know that yet.
But it's really well woven that in the first book, like the manor is named, it's Gardington, like everything is there, that then comes back in the fifth book. It's pretty clever. And the forger, the one who forged the letter, is never explained, but it's pretty
Bailey.
Yeah, it's pretty clearly Bailey, and that he got Gardington for forging the letter.
So we have an answer to a mystery that's been 5 books in the making.
Yeah. I just think she did such a good job of this because you know, so many of these long series lose the threads or never pay off on certain things, and she pays off everything.
Nice. Oh, we really don't like Leonard Bailey. He's terrible. Like in a pathetic kind of way. He's pathetic and sad and terrible. He does like books, but he doesn't read them.
Yeah, he doesn't even like the books. He uses them as collateral.
You know what this reminded me of, by the way, speaking of literary connections? It's the library at Gatsby's, in The Great Gatsby, where, I don't know if you remember, but when Nick goes into Gatsby's library in The Great Gatsby, the books are uncut, which means the pages have not been cut, so they can't be opened yet. And so Gatsby's library is filled with books that have never been opened. And it's just this sign of wealth, but it's a sign of wealth it's just incredibly shallow because the library isn't being used for its purpose. And that's what this reminded me of.
Yeah, just like this guy he's making so much money, and yet he's living this miserable, unhappy existence. And it's like, what's the point?
Well, and I think it even explains that this is a way for him to sort of stash his money by buying the books and keeping them up on the shelves, because he's not worried that anybody's going to come in and steal the books, which are worth quite a lot of money, because the people in this area aren't probably literate. So that's his way of, like, instead of worrying about having money around the house, he just buys books and he can sell them if he needs money for something.
It's like, what's the point? He's an old guy. He can't take it with him. Like, go do something enjoyable or build something, like do something with it.
Go have some experiences. Like,
most rich people don't understand that they can't take it with them for some reason. So
Well, I think it's at some point money becomes a way to keep score instead of money. Like it's just it's like scorekeeping. And
well, and he's like competing against like dead people, you know. He's just so bitter at the Crawfords and just wants to like they don't even know. I mean, I guess Sibylla knows because she's sending him money, but like it's not even about competing with people in an ostentatious way. It's just about his own like self-satisfaction in having accomplished something, got one over on them, whatever.
Well, and it's money he hasn't even earned. It's all blackmail from Sibylla. So, ew. Go away, Leonard Bailey. I got the name right.
Yeah.
I like how Lyman basically says, if you speak disrespectfully of my mother, I will throttle you. And so then throughout the whole conversation, he's just like heaping this like fake praise on Sibylla, the wonderful, gracious Sibylla, you know. It's just, he's so slimy. But it is quite telling that Lyman, who couldn't even talk to his mother and ran away from her, still is like, you say a bad word about her and I'll kill you. There's a lot of emotion going on here. It is not very rational.
Yeah. And Bailey, like it's this, he's got this hang up about his sister and his sister's death, but you know, Lyman, I think Lyman calls him on it quite accurately. It's like, it's not about his sister. And it's, you know, he's so angry, and yet he was, I mean, it's not like, what has happened to him? I don't, you know, it's so confusing. It's just bitter.
Yeah, it as a character, it makes sense. He was 8 years old. This was a formulative experience for him. It explains why he is like this. I mean, probably there were some genetic ingredients anyway, but then this experience led to this bitterness. But yeah, he's just creepy. He just let the worst part of him win. He also threatens, basically, if Lyman doesn't pay him off, tell Richard, right? I shall have to try if the other son thinks Honoria deserves better remembrance.
Which it is interesting. It is interesting that nobody seems to think that Richard is illegitimate. Like, that never seems to be a question. So clearly Richard looks a lot like Gavin, or who knows what.
Yeah, well, yeah, right, because Gavin was brown haired, right? And so is Richard.
Yeah.
So then we jump ahead to Lyman's birthday.
Mm-hmm.
November 1st, 1526.
She looked at Lyman, who was not, it seemed, the same age as her mother. Like, uh-oh, now we have a revelation here. So
finally.
Yeah. So we do learn that Francis and Eloise have this other father, which they talk about it some here, but it's so interesting that these copies of these documents, the father's name is, you know, blank. And so clearly, this all goes back to my insistence that whoever this man is, we know who it is, like we know them, and they're not random Frenchmen. Because I feel like if it was random Frenchmen, there's no reason to have a blank name. Like it's gotta be like the King of France, or Gavin's father, or I don't know, Margaret Lennox's father or something. I mean, that's totally random.
George Douglas.
George Douglas. But you know, it's gotta be someone we know, and it's gotta be someone who the revelation of their name makes an impact in some way. Like that it's so important that Sibylla is willing to pay a like king's ransom to Bailey this entire time.
Well, and Lyman asked the interesting question, why were the certificates written?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
yeah.
Why would Sibylla have done this? What reason would you have to want to have a record that this other person is the father of these two children?
Right. Which I feel like brings back, okay, so like 3 books ago, I can't remember when it was, I was wondering if Richard was illegitimate and Lyman was legitimate, because of, I think that makes a really interesting twist in their relationship, especially with Richard's identity so wrapped up in being the Lord of Mid-Culture. Which this sort of makes me think maybe there's something there, because there's a reason, like we want to have a reason to prove that this particular guy, we're going to witness the fact that these children are the children of this particular guy, whoever the guy is. But it still doesn't work time-wise. Like it totally fails. I cannot make it work in terms of time, because Richard is older, and yeah, I have no idea how it works, but I think it's interesting. I think there's something about legitimacy going on here. I mean, it just seems like you wouldn't want to have a record of a bastard. You'd want to have a record of a legitimate kid. So why? Unless the dad is like the king of France, and then you'd want the record for a bastard kid. But
it depends what she did to appease Gavin. Like, okay, in exchange for raising them as yours, I'll have the way for you to like keep them excluded from the inheritance or something.
So yeah. Gavin would know that they weren't actually his kids.
And there would be some sort of proof that like Lyman could never take over Mid-Culture, because there's this proof that he's not.
Yeah.
That would be a good explanation as to why Gavin was so terrible to Lyman.
Mm-hmm. Well, I've always thought that Gavin knew that Lyman wasn't his kid because of how horrible he was to him. But then the question becomes, why did he keep Sibylla around if his wife betrayed him twice? I mean, obviously more than twice, but at least twice. Why didn't he publicly denounce her? Why didn't he throw her out? You know, I think these are also questions that I have.
She's a well-crafted mystery, which we are no closer to solving after this.
No.
Okay, I had a wild, out of left field theory that popped into my head while I was reading this. And I don't think there's any possible way for this to be true, but tell me what you think.
Is it?
What if Marta is actually Eloise, and Eloise is not actually dead, and she's just been pretending? I don't think it's possible.
I think that's true, but I like the idea.
I like it too. It's totally like soap opera. But because Eloise sort of died and we never really got too much information about her, like that would be interesting. Because the reason I thought of it is because there's no paper in here for Marta, which either means she's not important at all, or she's not Sibylla's, or that Eloise is Marta.
Or she's random guy's daughter by someone else.
Yeah.
I was totally confused by that too. Like, why is Marta not mentioned unless she is Lyman's half sister from his father? But
what we know is that she blew up in the cloister,
a convent,
where the gunpowder was. But like, I don't think there's a really any way you could look at a body and say, oh yeah, that's definitely Eloise. So.
But she was like, what, 12 or 14 or something?
Yeah.
And she and Lyman were very close.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. Like, Lyman would have known if it was Eloise, if Marta really was Eloise.
Yeah,
but it's just
I like the idea.
The super soap opera thing. And there's been some super soap opera-y things that have showed up before, like an illegitimate bastard love child, not bastard, incest love child between Gabriel and Jolita, which when you first like, what if this is true? I was like, ew, no, stop. But it was true.
Yeah, she's not afraid of the trope, that is for sure. Yeah, I don't think that's true, but I like it.
I think it could certainly be a fanfic.
Yeah.
So I just enjoy these hints. I have reason to believe that you may have the talents of a forger. And the whole thing about I almost sent you to the headsman, like basically confirming, even though no one actually comes out and says like Leonard Bailey forged the letter that got Lyman sent off for treason. Like it's very, very, very apparent.
Yeah. I love it. I love he doesn't even deny it. He's like, I have a gift. Like, whoa. Yeah, and then Lyman, I mean, I think he treats him better than he deserves. He's like, you can keep getting money, just go away. And
doesn't he say something at some point like he it was because Philippe was there that he didn't just lose his shit and kill him?
Yeah.
Yeah, he did say that she was like a moderating influence on him. At some point he says that, because she says something like, I would have lost it, and he's like, well, you were the moderating influence. But
it's when they're at the inn later after this.
Yeah,
I mean, because maybe if he'd killed him, the mob would have they would have gotten away anyway. But yeah, it wouldn't have been good.
Yeah. I love that where she says, so she can tell that she wondered what part Bailey had played in his past when outlawed and sought by both England and Scotland. Lyman had come eventually to stand trial in Edinburgh on the evidence which Bailey must have helped manufacture. It took a self-denial approaching to Calvinism not to take revenge for that kind of malevolence, because so it's just Philippa noticing that. But I loved her, like, he had a Calvinist like self-denial. Just like, ouch.
I mean, he just been, his late teenage years on the galleys because of this guy.
Yeah.
I mean, it was really more because of Margaret Lennox, but yeah, this guy was
he was instrumental in it and clearly knew what he was doing, which,
So then right after that, there is also an interesting speculation. I think we're in Philippa's point of view about this being done for Sibylla, and then kind of like what's going on with Sibylla. Like that she must know or suspect why he's turned his back on her, but still had done nothing to put matters right. Because one was bound to suppose she dared not face the one question he was certain of right to ask her, the name which the paper left blank. What do you think? What is going on with her at this point? Because it's true, she must know that this is why.
What's going on with Sibylla? I mean, I think Philippa's, I think this is a good guess. Like, I don't know what's going on with Sibylla, but I think this is a very good guess. I think whoever the dad is going to cause, I think he's not random Frenchman. Like whoever the dad is going to cause some sort of like sea change through their family, or, some sort of devastating news that will break up and mess up things. And so, yeah, I think this is a pretty good guess.
Well, it's like, so even though she wants him back so badly, she won't tell him what's really going on, which then to him is just going to make it worse. Like, what is so bad that she won't tell me?
Yeah. I mean, I would have suspected that she was assaulted and that's, like she was raped, and then that, but the fact that she has 2 kids by this guy think like, well, maybe not, so yeah. She was like kidnapped for a couple of years or something, which that seems like a bridge too far.
Very soap opera. So then once we end this scene and they leave, we have another reveal with Lyman's hands. His hands gripping Philippa sent a rapid vibrating pulse into her arm, but he appeared otherwise perfectly collected. And then later he sends a groom to get her off the horse so that she can't figure out what's going on with him by touch. So even though he's playing it quite cool, his reaction to this is very intense.
Oh yeah, he wants to hurt this man. Absolutely.
Oh, here's the part that we were talking about at the bottom of 574, where she says, what is it? Spring from the opium. So lack of self-control, I thought, said Francis Crawford. Yes, well, I deserve that, said Philippa. grimly, getting up. I have seldom seen such an exhibition of howling restraint. And if you want to shout and smash things, please do. I should have been better pleased if you'd smashed Mr. Bailey, which I 100% agree with Philippa here. On the contrary, Lyman said, I think you were the restraining element, for which I'm grateful. Philippa, I'm better alone. You must forgive me. So that's where he said, like, she was the moderating influence.
I feel like we can all agree he should have just killed the guy.
I do like that she says, talking about his father, except that we both know Sibylla, whoever he is, he must be a remarkable man. Your blood is not Gavin's, which would please anybody. Do not want to know who it is. You know, I just love that she's like, well, we know Sibylla, so whoever your dad is, he must be pretty amazing. It's like, oh.
Plot twist, his father's Gideon Somerville.
Oh, that would be so good. No more incest babies.
I really seriously hope not.
I reject that out of hand. That is a terrible idea. Oh.
So then they talk about what to do next, and should they go try to find the papers with the name? And she kind of volunteers, and he tells her, please don't do that.
Which means she's totally going to.
It is interesting that they speculate the papers must be in France.
Yeah. And I mean, I sort of love that he tells her not to do it, but he also gives her a whole bunch of clues about what to do. So it's like, you know, it's sort of like, don't do it. But if you would do it, then you should probably check with these people and look at that and go check with the Dom de Titans and check with the midwives. And it's like, yeah, it's like, here's the checklist of all the things that you should not do. You know, so. But then Philippa says, there's one missing, there's no paper for Marta. And I wrote beside it, oh, too far. Like, that might have been another case of her just saying something, you know, beyond, I don't know.
I mean, Lyman seems to have made his peace with Marta when she helped him in the tower in Volos. So I think he's accepted that it is his sister and that she's a part of his life, but he hasn't seen her in 2 years because she and Jarrett went off to the corners of the earth. Where?
What have they been up to for these past however many years it's been? 3 years, whatever, 4 years, I don't even know.
Yeah, I don't think we're gonna get a last second appearance by them in this book, so they definitely better show up in the last book.
I'm dying to know what they've been doing. Like, and I really, really hope that they're together and like bickering across North Africa or something. Just like, except I guess it did say something about how Jarrett was with St. Mary's. Didn't it say earlier in the book that Jarrett is doing something with St. Mary's in France?
No, I think he says he wasn't with St. Mary's anymore.
He's like, Alex took over because Jarrett wasn't there.
Oh, because Jarrett wasn't there. Okay, so yeah. So I think Jarrett and Marta need to be like bickering on separate camels, traveling across North Africa, bickering the entire way.
With children in tow. It has been 3 years.
That's true.
It's conceivable.
I do agree that Lyman has gotten over Marta in the sense of like he can acknowledge she's his sister and he can like deal with her now, but I think he hasn't gotten over like the core like revelation, because the whole reason he couldn't deal with her is because he was so in denial about anything being off with Sibylla. Yeah. Now that that's undeniable, Marta doesn't have that like knife in the heart by her very existence. He still obviously hasn't figured out how to deal with the.
I think she's still kind of a sore spot. You know, like there's a little bit of that.
But it's also like, it's not just Marta anymore. It's Bailey, it's these papers, it's unavoidable now.
It's knowing that Richard isn't his full brother.
Yeah, and it's Sibylla herself. He couldn't even like look at her or talk to her or anything.
Yeah, so then we get at the end of this section, which is that the poor messenger gets locked up at the chicken, which is funny. So the poor messenger never gets to Lyman, and Lyman rides away early in the morning, and Philippa wakes up and he's gone. So.
You skipped that he calls her Unitza.
Oh, I did skip that.
And he tells her it means heifer. Why does he call her that?
No.
Well, I think it's a callback to where they were saying about bulls and heifers earlier in the chapter. They had this whole exchange about bulls and heifers. But really, are we going to call someone that? Like, it seems. Also, does it really mean that? I don't know.
It might be the term of endearment in Russia.
I didn't look up this word, so I don't know. Should we look up the word, or should we just let it lie for now?
Let it lie for now. Guess what it means.
Beloved.
Yeah, like I feel like it doesn't mean heifer. Like that seems like a terrible thing to call someone. Unitza. Maybe it means like little something. I don't know. Is that a diminutive form of something?
Could be.
I don't know
any Russian. We have to ask Natalia.
I don't know Russian.
Oh.
We could ask Natalia.
Final thoughts on these chapters, and next 3 is the end of the book. So any
finish. Most of the stuff we talked about in our last session about, you know, what we wanted to see, none of it happened. So it all still sort of stands. I actually didn't think we'd even be getting to see Leonard Bailey in this book. So that was a bit of a surprise. But I didn't really think we'd get any true solid answers about the parentage, which we didn't. So, yeah.
I like the way that we got more questions, and we got Leonard Bailey, and we got some stuff, but we have the exact same mystery that we had before. Like we still, like you said, we still haven't answered anything. It's still a complete mystery. I think that's all going to get pushed to the next book. I really don't think we're going to find out anything in this book.
We did get a little further in how Lymond is reacting to having fallen in love with Philippa. Any thoughts on how that's going to manifest to the end?
Ooh, he's going to fight that tooth and nail for a long time. Yeah, I don't see them falling into each other's arms with delighted laughter anytime soon.
I'm especially excited for these last 3 chapters because unlike most of the other books, I literally have no idea where it's going to go from here. Like, what is going to happen that keeps Lyman from going back to Russia? Because that's the only thing that I'm sure of, is that he's not going back to Russia. So
I think Philippa is going to have some part in it.
I do too. And I just don't know what or how.
I would really like it if it was Philippa and the guys somehow. Like, you know, like Adam and Ludo and Danny Hislop somehow, I don't know, like it would be fun to see. They've just been such a part of the story. I would like them to be part of this ending in some way. And we know I'm going to say that we know Lyman's not going to go back to Russia. Like, I feel like that's pretty, I don't think he's going to go back. But somehow we have to get him from completely determined to go back to Russia to not going back to Russia.
Right.
And
it's going to take something momentous at this point.
Take something, I don't even know. Like, they're gonna have to trick him in some way, or there's gonna have to be some disaster that he has to go chase down and rescue. Like, maybe news of Jarrett's imminent demise or something will come, and he'll have to go like rescue him or something.
Maybe the start of the war between England and France will have something to do with it, because we know that's happening very soon.
Yeah.
Maybe something to do with, what if he actually gets caught because of the papers, the Edward Courtney papers, and what if he gets arrested before being able to, you know, go back to Russia and they throw him in the tower or something at the end of the book?
What if Philippa and Lyman get thrown in the Tower of London, and you know they're sitting there with the ravens?
Mm-hmm.
At the end of the book.
It'd be an interesting way to start the last book.
Yeah, there's some sort of like literal sword hanging over their heads, you know.
Yeah, but I'm excited to see. So.
Yeah. Or it would be fun to see some sort of, I think, because Lyman is always manipulating people into doing things, you know, like he's always manipulating people around him not necessarily in bad ways, but he does that. I think it would be really fun to see like him manipulated for his own good in some way, and just have people who care about him try and prevent him from making this big mistake of going back to Russia, which everyone except him can see is a big mistake, except for Ludo, who seems to want to go back to Russia with him. But
I just think he wants to follow him. I think if he doesn't go back to Russia, he'll stay too. Like something happened, and I think we discussed this last time. You said maybe it was when he killed Slaughter Baba to save the child that like completely changed his mind. So,
and I do believe he's had. I do actually believe his change of heart. I don't think he's a good enough liar to fake it.
Remember in the beginning of the book how he was like telling Dick and Chancellor, I would keep your son away from Lymond. Like he's
Right.
He had a really bad opinion of him to begin with.
Yeah, and he didn't hide it at all. Yeah, so I think it'd be fun if we had some sort of like, I don't know, forcing Lyman to do something that's good for him. Because so often in the books, like I've just wanted to be like, no, don't do that. You know, there's so many times when I'm like, oh no, don't do that. Or go this way, you know, and you can't, and he goes off, and Lyman goes off and does the thing that's, you know, leads to sadness. And so I think with your idea of like when the readers put in the position of the characters and we are kind of part of the characters, I want some characters to just be like like those old vaudeville hooks where you grab somebody from the side of the stage. I just want somebody to be like, no, don't do that. You know? So, yeah. But
all right, fan art. I have a little bit.
I wish I could draw. I would so love to do fan art.
Me too. So here's that moment you need a witness. Unwanted, unasked, unwelcomed as ever, here I am again. This is Bella Rolls on Tumblr. And then this one cracks me up.
That's hilarious.
This is Sleepy Hour on Tumblr, and apparently this is a quote from Scrubs. There's a video linked if you want to watch the video.
What Scrubs? Oh, the TV show.
The TV show, yeah. This is dialogue from Scrubs, but it works very, very well for this moment in the books.
That is funny. Philippe, I'm 29.
And you're 20. I've just realized after books and books of misaging you.
Yes, on both sides. You're so old, you're so young, and it's like, oh, we're both in our 20s. All right, anything final to share before we wrap?
I'm looking forward to the end. I have no idea where this book is going to go in 3 chapters.
Come back and see how we react to the end of this one. So
yeah,
I have a feeling it's going to be fun.
I feel like we've got like 12 chapters worth of stuff to happen, and we've only got 3 chapters to do it in. So
yeah, and no tragedy.
No tragedy.
What do you think you're reading?
But no more, at least not for the end of the book.
Oh, I can't take it. Oh.
It'll be fine. Well, thank you so much for everyone who's watching and commenting. I'm glad you're still watching this.
Thanks for hanging in with us.
Yep.